I can literally say from the time that I woke up in the morning to the time that I went to bed at night, I was thinking about food in some capacity. I didn't want my recovery to look like me just eating cake all the time. Hello guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. We are going to be talking about extreme hunger today, and as a part of that, we're going to be talking about eating disorders. So if any of that triggers you, definitely go ahead and click away now because it's not worth you being triggered. Before we get further into this, I just want to say I'm not a nutritionist, dietitian, medical professional, and really the only authority that I have on this topic is my own experience and the research that I've done on my own. So in no way am I telling you what you should do, what's going to work for you. Like, not at all. I would be crazy to sit here and pretend that just because something worked for me means that it's going to work for you. You absolutely need to do what's best for you. And if you have a treatment team, listen to them, listen to people that care about you. But this is just my experience. So really quickly, I'm going to give you the nutshell version of my story just to give you a little bit of context. But I had a very restrictive eating disorder from about the time I graduated high school, well into my college years. So things got really bad my freshman year of college. I lost a lot of weight. I wasn't eating a lot. I was heavily restricting, thinking that I was being healthy, which is ironic on so many levels. But anyways, I started binging around the end of my freshman year, beginning of sophomore year actually is when it got pretty bad. But even though I was binging, I was still heavily restricting and I was purging at times. So there was this binge, restrict, occasional purge cycle. Even though I was binging, I was heavily restricting. And in fact, the binging made the restricting worse because I felt like I needed to compensate for the binges. Anyways, during this time, I was constantly hungry, like hungry all the freaking time. Food was the only thing that I ever thought about. I can literally say from the time that I woke up in the morning to the time that I went to bed at night, I was thinking about food in some capacity. I was wondering what I was gonna eat, when I was gonna eat, how many calories I was gonna be eating, if I was gonna be burning off the calories that I ate. It was the constant thing that consumed my mind. And I was always hungry, but I was always not letting myself eat to satiety. So in other words, I would maybe eat a small amount of food and I was still hungry afterwards. Maybe I would eat to like 50% full or 75% full, but I was never completely full. And then I would binge, and when I binged, that was the only time that I really felt full, like I really felt satiated. But then the very next day I would go back to restricting because I thought I needed to compensate. And again, at this point, I didn't even realize what I was doing was restricting. I thought I was just eating a normal amount. Spoiler alert, I was not eating a normal amount. I was absolutely restricting, but I didn't realize it at the time. Fast forward a little bit into the future, I had been doing a lot of research trying to figure out how to manage my binging. From all that I had been reading and studying, I was realizing that I needed to eat consistent, normal meals that would fill me up and that would hopefully limit my binging. And so at this time, I was trying to be more consistent with the meals that I ate, but I was still hungry. As an example, it's a running joke in my family that my two brothers are bottomless pits, in as much as they can eat so much food. And both of them are 6'4", tall, big guys, and they would literally eat like 3 times the amount of food that I would eat when we were younger. And it was just this running joke that, oh my goodness, like my mom can't feed them enough, or like no one can feed them because they're constantly hungry. But during this time when I was struggling with the extreme hunger and the restriction and everything, I would go home and I would eat with my family, and I would eat an amount that I thought was appropriate for me and my size and everything. And then I would see what my brothers were eating, and all I could think was I could so easily eat everything that they were eating and then some. I knew that I could eat all of the food on the table and I would still be hungry. I felt like I could eat a Thanksgiving, Christmas meal for every single meal. Like, that's how hungry I was. And I'd kind of just accepted the fact that I probably would never be full. I kind of just accepted that, maybe everyone feels this way. Maybe everyone's hungry after they finish a meal. And I wasn't letting myself eat to full satiety because I thought, I genuinely believed that I wasn't supposed to. I thought I was supposed to eat like a normal small amount, or an amount that was appropriate for my gender and my size. And anyways, all that craziness. I really believed that it wasn't possible for me to be fully satiated unless I binged. But again, spoiler alert, that is not true because I am sitting here today telling you that I do not experience extreme hunger anymore. There are times that I guess you could say I have flashbacks to the extreme hunger, and I have feelings that are very similar to the feelings that I had when I was dealing with the extreme hunger, but those are few and far between, and I can genuinely say I do not struggle with it anymore. I can eat until I'm full, and then I can stop most times anyways, and then move on with my day, and thoughts of food do not constantly consume my mind, which is the most freeing thing ever. If you know, you know what I'm talking about. If not, there's no way I can describe it to you, but to be free from the constant thoughts of food is just so infinitely valuable. Anyways, okay, let me move into the 3 things that helped me get over my extreme hunger. And again, I am not saying this is what you should do. I'm not saying this is gonna work for everyone. I'm just telling you what worked for me. Number 1 was putting a name to what I was experiencing and understanding it from a logical perspective. So before I kind of dived into the research and trying to figure out what was going on, I just genuinely thought I was lacking willpower, that I didn't have enough self-control, that I was a glutton or something. Like, why was I constantly hungry? And I was berating myself because I thought this isn't normal, or maybe it is normal, I just wasn't sure, and I was angry, and I was hungry all the time, and I was hangry, and anyways, I couldn't understand what was going on. But after doing a lot of research and understanding what extreme hunger is, and also understanding that it affects many people who have come from a restrictive eating disorder, it was really comforting to know that A, I wasn't alone, and B, also to just put a name to what I was experiencing. And another thing that was really helpful is to understand it from a logical, rational mindset. I'm a very logical and rational person, and a lot of the decisions that I make are based off of logic, and that's just kind of how my brain works. And so if something makes sense to me, I feel like it's easier for me to accept and work on whatever. From a very logical standpoint, I was able to understand that my body had been starving for so long. I had been starving my body for so long that it did not trust me to feed it enough. And so the starvation alarm bells were still ringing, even though at this point I was feeding myself, a little bit, probably not enough, and I was binging and I had access to food. But even though my brain knew that I had access to food, my body did not trust that I was going to feed it. And I was essentially experiencing and existing in a deficit, like a food deficit. From a rational level, like that made sense to me. Since I hadn't been feeding my body enough, I was now compelled to overcompensate. It made sense. And so once I kind of understood what I was going through and that there was a thing that was called extreme hunger, and I was definitely not the only person that was experiencing this, and understanding it from a very basic rational level, I was then able to move forward with addressing the extreme hunger, which brings us to tip number 2. And again, this is one that I do not recommend for everyone. Well, to be fair, I'm not recommending anything in this video. I'm just sharing the things that have worked for me, but take what you want from it. But number 2 was I gave myself unconditional permission and freedom to eat whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and I got rid of all my food rules and I ate to satiety. This was revolutionary for me because at this time I had so many rules around food. So I decided that whatever I was craving, I was gonna do whatever I possibly could to go and get myself that food, and I would eat until I was full and no foods were off limits. And I will just say, during this time, I ate some crazy combinations of food. I made a lot of Taco Bell runs. I would eat cake for breakfast. I ate a lot of pickles, oddly, for some reason. That was kind of a thing. I ate the weirdest foods, but I just kind of accepted the fact that whatever my body was craving, we would just accept it with no judgment. And I would go and if possible, even if, because I lived at my university at the time, but if possible, I would go to the store even if I needed to get the food that my body wanted. That wasn't always possible, but I did try to go out of my way to get the food that my body wanted. Now, I will say my motivation to do tip number 2, or like number 2 here, was not consistent. It definitely ebbed and flowed. And there were times that I did really well when it came to honoring my cravings, and then there were times that I just went back into my eating disorder and just listened to that eating disorder voice. So it was this constant battle, struggle, back and forth. I think that if I had been consistent from the beginning, my extreme hunger would have gone away a lot sooner. But honestly, this process lasted probably a couple of years, but when I was able to consistently feed myself and eat to satiety and eat what I was craving and eat when I was hungry, that was huge. And over time, my extreme hunger went away. The third thing that helped me me was using my knowledge of nutrition to my advantage. A few months after kind of going all in, or like giving myself full permission to eat whatever and whenever I wanted, I was realizing that I was gravitating towards certain types of food, and I ate a lot of carbs and I ate a lot of sweets. And again, I'm not saying this is a problem. My body needed those foods. They were the calorically dense foods because, I mean, if you think about it, my body had been starving, and so it makes sense that I would gravitate towards calorically dense foods for number one. Number two, those were foods that had previously been off limits, so I had this natural craving towards them. And so I wasn't upset that I was eating all those foods. It was part of the process, but I also realized that I wanted to get to a point in my recovery where I was able to have balanced, nutritious meals. Like, I didn't want my recovery to look like me just eating cake all the time. Not that that was ever going to be off limits. Like, I wanted to be able to eat all foods, but I wanted to have a balance of foods. All right. And I realize this might be controversial, so again, take what you want from it. Also, I apologize. My housemates are walking around upstairs. But anyways, for me, I believed and still do believe that I will function the best, like my body will feel the best and I will feel happiest and the strongest when I have a balance of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats in my diet. And again, this is not me saying that I exclude any food in my diet, because I don't, but I do try to make intentional choices to include those 3 food groups into my diet. And so that's what I did when I was going all in, or whatever you want to call it. I wasn't taking food out, but I was being really intentional about adding foods in to have as much of a balanced diet as I could. If I had a day where I just ate cake all day, it was fine. I didn't beat myself up about that because I realized that it was part of the healing process. I had this end goal of having a lifestyle and a diet that was full of nutrients and that was satiating. And so while I was going all in and giving myself unconditional permission to eat whatever I wanted, I made sure, or I did the best I could. I wasn't very strict about this and I never counted macros, but I tried to be intentional about making sure that I had a somewhat balanced meal. Still today, I don't count macros. Throughout my day, I do try to be intentional just to make sure that I'm eating like some protein, some fat, some carbohydrates, and just try to more or less be decently balanced. Again, not super particular and strict about it. I'm not a huge advocate. Well, I'm not an advocate at all of counting macros, but if that works for you, that works for you. It wouldn't work for me. But I do try to be intentional to have that balanced diet. I think that our bodies operate best when there is a variety of macronutrients and whatnot. But again, going through this process, it wasn't about taking food out. It was about adding food back in, right? So it wasn't about, I'm not gonna eat this cake. I'm gonna eat the cake, but I'm also going to have some avocado on my toast because that's a good source of healthy fat. Okay, those are the 3 things that helped me. So just recognizing that I was experiencing extreme hunger. 2 was giving myself unconditional permission to eat whatever and whenever and to satiety. And number 3, using my knowledge of nutrition to kind of help me in this process and help me along the way. After a long time, like I mentioned before, my motivation ebbed and flowed throughout this process, but after I was able to consistently feed myself and honor my cravings and eat to satiety and stop cutting out certain food groups, my extreme hunger got less and less, and I was able to eventually eat and feel full after maybe 1 plate of food when, a few months ago, it might have been 2 plates of food to get to that same fullness level, because I was, again, rebuilding that trust between my body and my mind was starting to trust me. My body was starting to trust me to feed it enough food. For example, I ate a couple hours ago and I put my food away and I haven't thought about food since. Well, besides the fact that I wrote a whole script about it and I'm filming a video about it, but other than that, I wouldn't have thought about it. And in a couple hours, I'll probably be hungry again and I'll go and get some more food. This might seem really normal to some people, but a few years ago, I would never have been able to do this. I would have eaten and then I would have still been hungry and I would constantly be thinking about food and I would think that I should eat more, but I don't want to because I shouldn't, but I should. And literally food was on my mind all the time. And now I can just leave it because I ate until I was full and I put the food away and I know that I'm going to eat when I'm hungry again. Now, it's not that I never struggle with not eating enough or overeating, but I am saying that life is so much better now than it was even just a year or 2 ago. So just know that if you're dealing with this, A, you're not alone, and B, I'm so sorry that you're having to go through it because it genuinely sucks. As someone who has been there, it sucks. It's the worst. And just know that there's hope. If you don't take anything else from this video, just know that I'm here and I want to support you in any way I can. So feel free to reach out to me by leaving a comment or follow me on Instagram and send me a private message if you need some support or encouragement. Also, Shameless plug, my Instagram at Kristi's_day. Go follow me and subscribe to my channel. That really means a lot to me. And I'm wishing you guys all the best in your journey and your recovery. And I love you guys, and I will see you in the next video.